and other forms of oppression were rendered free. Hope that we preserve our planet, its resources, ecosystems, and wonders for generations yet to be born. Mr. President, for the past 76 years, every year, we gather in this great hall and give speeches that inspire us to scale seemingly insurmountable odds to resolve the various problems that afflict our global community. Yet, for all our achievements and success, the COVID-19 pandemic has pushed our progress back years. The adverse impacts of climate change are increasing. The steady growth of the world's population is also increasing the presence of famine. And the menace of terrorism remains one of the biggest challenges we face today. This is an ever-present blemish on our common humanity. Which is why my first and foremost duty this morning would be to call on the world community to give our hope resoluteness by backing them up with effort. I believe the 5 rays of hope offered in your PGA manifesto presents great hope in itself, Mr. President. From our small island nations to the powers spanning continents, the consequences of COVID-19 have been the same. It has laid bare in the starkest of terms what we have already known. Namely, that in today's world we are bound together. We must work together in solidarity, in unity, to achieve our ambitions together. Mr. President, for the Maldives, as was the case the world over, the COVID-19 pandemic was a challenge without precedent. Our economy relies on welcoming tourists to these shores. We import nearly everything from food to medicine to the materials we build our shelters with. Having shut down our borders, we were faced with catastrophic outcomes. Tourists stopped arriving, foreign currency receipts dropped, businesses went under. The lockdown hindered social well-being. It set back years of schooling for our beloved children. Our task at hand back then was to determine the best course of action. The decision to close our borders was neither desired nor welcome. Left without choice, we had to close our borders. We acquired all the resources required to upgrade our healthcare system from scratch. At the time, a vaccine was a distant dream. Throughout this plight, we firmly abided by strict standards. We successfully managed the pandemic by determinedly following the instructions set by our healthcare professionals. Employees, agencies, and volunteers willingly lined up. Food, medical supplies, and other necessities were stocked up. As a result, we were able to tackle the pandemic. We have vaccinated 95% of all school children and 85% of all residents in the Maldives. Schools have resumed, businesses have restarted, our borders have been reopened, opening the doors to our resorts. The Maldives is ready to welcome the world. The Maldives has once again become sunny side of life. Come visit us, Mr. President. COVID-19 will persist as long as it is not defeated everywhere. The key is vaccines. Vaccinating the world as soon as possible is the way we overcome. Vaccine equity is of paramount importance in this regard. Eventually, in time, as the world recovers from the COVID-19 menace, we must all collectively resolve to make sure that such a catastrophe is not repeated again. Our citizens are banking their hopes on all present here to ensure that we pool our resources, efforts, knowledge, skills and discoveries to prevent the next world pandemic. Mr. President, managing the virus is one aspect of recovery from COVID-19. Equally important is the task of rebuilding our economy, restoring livelihoods, and a return to normal life. Mr. President, COVID-19 is an urgent call to action. There is overwhelming scientific evidence that the climate emergency would be catastrophic to humanity. The report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, published mere weeks ago, was a shocking reiteration of what we have known for long. It was shocking because of the starkness of its pronouncements. That we have merely brushed off the reality of climate change for far too long. I wish to highlight one important aspect in this report, that the past 5 years have been the hottest on record since records started in the mid-19th century. The rate of sea level rise has tripled in comparison to the period 1901 to 1970. We have already caused a 1.1 degrees Celsius increase in warming of the planet. The recommendations are alarming given their urgency. How global emissions need to be reduced by 45% by 2030 and reach net zero by 2050 to limit warming to 1.5 degrees. Existential threat, cease to exist, climate vulnerable, risk of disappearing, loss of identity, ecological refugees are all phrases commonly tossed around to describe the plight of Maldivians and other island states like us would face if the current trends continue unabated. The difference between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees is a death sentence for the Maldives. One overarching fact remains. The state of environmental ruin small island states endure now will without a doubt catch up with bigger nations sooner than later. There is no guarantee of survival for any one nation in a world where the Maldives ceases to exist. I come here today with messages that resonate closer to the heart than the cold facts presented by science. I carry in my hand the words of young Maldivian children who have written to me asking me to share their pleas for a world's climate with this assembly. These are pleas to protect the vulnerable environment that they call home, the home where they will grow up in, the home where they hope to achieve their dreams. This is the collective calling of generations to come. We must listen. Yet we remain hopeful that the day is not lost. Addressing the climate emergency requires a break from the lackluster business as usual practices that currently dominate the global climate change regime. It requires countries to adopt more stringent measures to halt their emissions. It needs the world's wealthy nations to help smaller nations receive the support in the form of capacity building, technology transfers, and financial resources to ramp up their